Uh, Good morning. It is right now, it's actually early afternoon. It is 12:19 of April 8th, 2025. And you people of the future know something that I do not, which is what's going to happen with this set of tariffs that Mr. Trump, our current president, you may be in the future, he may be a different president, has imposed upon the U.S. economy, and arguably because it's broader the world economy. Now, many people are concerned about the economics of these tariffs and whether they work and does protectionism work and all that stuff. And we could deal with that in another video. But the big question, a lot of people, since this is a constitutional review, are asking is like, hey, doesn't Article 1 give the power to tariff to Congress? How is it that the president's doing tariffs at all? Because it seems like it's probably legal for him to do it. Whether or not it's a good idea, of course, you in the future will know. But they're asking because deep in our understanding of liberty here in America is an aversion to the idea that the executive can impose any kind of tax or tariff upon the country. And that goes back, you got to remember, our founders are Englishmen. And that aversion goes way, way, way back to 1215. Remembering, our founders really had two conceptions of liberty. They had this conception, this Enlightenment idea of really universal ideals, all men are created equal, etc. But then when you go to the Declaration of Independence and you go to the complaint in the Declaration, we find very particular concerns, especially number 19, imposing taxes without our consent, and cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. These are things that the Americans were deeply against. So where does that come from? Where does it come from that our founders did not want to see an executive imposing either a tax or a tariff? Well, that idea goes way, way back to 1215. And when you study the history of liberty in the Anglo Saxon world, which is where we are here in America, you're going to find that conception goes back to a document called Magna Carta. Magna Carta means Charter of Rights. It was originally imposed upon King John by his nobles. They were ticked off at him. They weren't happy with him. And he wanted them to raise money. He couldn't seem to do it himself. And so they made him sign a charter. And in Magna Carta, it says, no scutage or aid shall be imposed on our kingdom except by common council of our kingdom. And that means that the king cannot impose a tax. That's a huge understanding that we have. And that's, one reason why when we go to our Constitution, which we can do right now, you'll find that we cannot, the president cannot impose a tax. So if we go to the Constitution, you've got your copy, you go Article 1, Section 1, and you go down to the rights of Congress. So, sorry, it's Article 1, Section 8. I apologize. You'll see all the things that Congress can do. And it says, top of the list, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. In other words, it's an Article 1 power. It's a congressional power. And to broaden it out, we will find that congressional power is by far the largest power in our Constitution. Number one, it's number one. It's literally the first thing they put in there. So it's a good hint that it's the most important thing. But when we go down our list, the coining money, punishment of counterfeiting securities and coin in the United States, declare war, grant letters of marque, raise and support armies, provide for a navy. Almost all the power in the government is really in Congress. Congress authorizes what can be done. The executive branch, as we're going to find out in our next video, is really just there to enact the will of Congress. And the legislative branch, the judicial branch, is really just doing, all they're really supposed to be doing is kind of calling balls and strikes. Like, is that law in comportment with the Constitution? Is it not? That's really what the Supreme Court does. Congress is so powerful, by the way, and I think very few people actually understand this, that other than the Supreme Court, all the judicial power in the United States is originated with Congress. And it says, I think this is Article, this is 9 of Article 8. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. So all of our appeals courts, etc., are actually created by Congress. And we should think one more thing about Congress. As you may recall, our founders were very anxious from our last video about faction, just to show how powerful Congress really is. And they said that the way they were going to deal with faction was by to divide America into what they called a compound republic. This is in Federalist 51. The power surrendered by the people is divided into two distinct governments, and the portions allotted and subdivided amongst distinct and separate departments. Hence, a double security arises of the rights of people. In other words, they were concerned that when people gave away their rights, they weren't going to get them back, and they weren't going to be able to control them. And that faction, that is, people who were arrayed against other people in the country, would come to dominate our government, and those factions would undermine the rights of people. And this is what Madison goes on to say in Federalist 51. In a society in the forms which the stronger faction can really unite and oppress the weaker, anarchy may is truly said to be reign as in a state of nature, where the weak individual is not secured against the violence of the stronger, as in a latter state, even the stronger individuals are prompted. In other words, you don't even really have a government if you are an oppressed and weaker party when faction takes over government. So the whole idea of our Constitution is to split up any factions into sort of minute pieces so that our interests are going all over the place, such that one group cannot take over the entire government. That's the essential purpose. And Congress is so powerful that if we go back to Article 1, you'll see Article 1, Section 2, well, actually 1 says, all legislative power herein shall be vested in Congress, which consists of a Senate and a House. In other words, Congress is so powerful, it's divided into two. That's just to give you an understanding of like how powerful our Congress is. And the issue of taxation, probably more than in most countries, was very prescient for our founders, because taxation, and especially trade duties, are much more important in a commercial people. And Americans have always been a commercial nation. We were not founded by landed gentry, and there were very few true peasants here. In other words, most Americans were heavily involved in the money economy from the very, very start. And so when they thought about tariffs, they wanted Congress, which is a deliberative body with a lot of people representing both the people of the United States and the states of the United States, they wanted all that input to make sure that tariffs really made sense because of the impact they could have on business. So whether you think these Trump tariffs are a good idea and whether they have been a good idea, you're in the future, I'm not, maybe they worked out great. The idea of the executive imposing tariffs seems very much out of line with our Constitution, with the concerns of our founders, and even going back in English history to Magna Carta. We didn't go into it, but to the English Bill of Rights of 1688. So how is it that the president got the power to impose a tariff? It would seem odd, but he actually does have that power. And to understand that, we have to go back to the 16th Amendment, which was in 1913. And the 16th Amendment really changed a lot of how America works. Before 1913, the vast majority of government duties, or government collection, was in the form of tariffs. So our government was largely funded by putting up trade barriers with other countries and making people pay to import goods into the country. After 1913, we made direct tariffs on individuals the primary way that our government collects money. And after that, there actually have been a number of acts starting in the 1930s and the 1960s that allow the president to enact tariffs. And so President Trump is not the first president to enact tariffs. George Bush did it back in the early 2000s. Biden kept Trump's tariffs in the last administration. So there is case law and there is law that has effectively granted that power to the president. Now, that's still controversial whether or not Congress can really grant its power to the president. It'll probably, and you in the future would know more about this than I would, it'll probably be challenged. But it's just interesting to note that our founders in Article 1, and this is our little video in Article 1, put right at the top that Congress's power is to tax, and the exclusive power to tax. That's changed by the 16th Amendment, really, which takes that taxation power and really makes it, the majority of our federal government funding comes through individual taxes. And since then, a number of Congresses have given the president the right to power in emergency circumstances. Many presidents have used the power. Arguably, the tariffs that Donald Trump is doing right now are, the broadest use of that power, and we'll see what happens. So, thank you very, very much for watching, and I hope the future is doing well. So, future people, I hope it's all going well, and I hope this video is still relevant to you. Thank you so much.